So Timothy Beatley is the Teresa Hines Professor of Sustainable Communities in the Department of Urban and Environmental Planning, School of Architecture at the University of Virginia, where he's taught for the last 25 years. Much of Professor Beatley's work focuses on the subject of sustainable communities and creative strategies by which cities and towns can fundamentally reduce their ecological footprint while at the same time becoming more livable and equitable places. Professor Beatley believes that sustainable and resilient cities represent our best hope for addressing today's environmental challenges. So I will stop my share and oh,
Great. Well, thank you, Leslie. I hope you can hear me. Let me know if you can't. Um,
we do.
You do. That's good. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and find the right uh, presentation. Let's see. Okay, so you should be able to see the opening slide.
We do. We do.
All good. Okay. Leslie, it would be great if you could help keep track of time for me too. If when we get to, I know we have about an hour, but maybe at 45 minutes or something, we do want to leave time for discussion and
Okay.
questions, Q&A. And certainly give me a heads up when we're coming at the end, where we need to end. I have a tendency to sort of get in the zone with slideshows, and I have a bit of a reputation for having too many slides for any time slot that I have, it seems like.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's
So,
fantastic. So I will
well,
I'll definitely do that, and I will
okay,
watch
please
the
chime in.
if
Yeah,
people. I just wanted to tell the folks too, if you could just put something in the chat, and if you have a question that we need to urgently ask during the presentation, Professor Beatley has said we could maybe do that too. So, but basically, I think it's easier to stop and share at the end
yeah,
questions.
yeah. Either way, and are happy to answer questions along the way. And I may not see the chat box, but I'd be happy with a small group like this. You're welcome to just unmute and say, "Hey, Tim," and ask a question, and we can make it more interactive. That would be fine. You won't offend me at all by doing that. So
Okay.
what I thought I'd do in the time that I have is just tell you a little bit about this biophilic cities concept and global movement, we would call it, and it's also a global network of cities, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. Cities of various sizes, all kind of committing to the importance of investing in nature. There is a bird component to this, but I know for this group you probably know a lot about that. But I can maybe tell you a little bit more about what's happening in some of our cities. And then Leslie, we're just talking about the tree conservation things, and that's another thing we've been spending a lot of time on lately. And in fact, we have a new Center for Forest Urbanism here at UVA, and some wonderful things happening there. And it's all sort of course, interconnected. So for us, a lot of this work does revolve around the idea of biophilia. You undoubtedly know the term. This literally the love of life or the love of nature. Here's a quote from E.O. Wilson, Ed Wilson at Harvard. He wasn't the first person to use this term, but he's really the one that's coined it in the way that we think of it today. This idea that we've co-evolved with nature, that we carry with us our ancient brains, that we are happier, healthier, and able to lead more meaningful lives when we have nature all around us. So biophilia forms sort of a centerpiece for this vision of biophilic design and biophilic cities. So when I think about this a remarkable amount of evidence, I think, as probably most of you all know, about the power of nature, and it seems to be growing weekly. And we could spend the whole hour just talking about some of that evidence. For me, it's quite intuitive, and probably for most of you all in this group, when you think about the things that give us pleasure and delight and joy in the world, they're all the things on the screen. They're birds and butterflies and flowers and trees, especially for me, and water. All these things we know are biophilic, and they touch us. We're drawn to them. They have special power in our lives. And birds fall into that category. Certainly for me, it's a lot of evidence about the power of seeing birds, but also hearing birds and bird song. So if I had to summarize, there is quite a bit of literature. All the things on the right side of the screen are things that we see in the presence of nature, and it's a lot of mounting evidence, not so much causal, but it's very correlational or associational, and to me, pretty compelling. So in the presence of nature, where we see anxiety levels go down, stress levels go down, we see our mood improved. There's evidence from environmental psychology that in the presence of nature, we're more likely to be generous, more likely to be cooperative, more likely to think longer term. I think it's a pretty good case to make that we are better human beings when we have nature all around us. And our vision of a natureful city or a biophilic city is one that says we can't just rely on those experiences of nature that happen once or twice a year on a vacation, on a holiday. It has to be all that nature incorporated all around us where we spend most of our time, which is where we live and where we work and in cities. I'm often using the word flourishing as a good way to summarize the power of nature. And I think about, the ways in which we do gain delight and joy and pleasure from nature, but it's also deeper meaning and purpose and deeper connections to place and connections to each other. The word flourishing to me is a word that captures a lot more of that, of the fullness of that benefit and value that nature has. It's interesting to think about how we all lived during the pandemic and what we learned from the pandemic. And we know that there are a lot of folks who discovered birds and started listening to birds, and we realized it was necessary for our mental health to be outside. And then a lot of cities, even today, it's been difficult, of course, to get people to go back into the office, and that's been interesting to watch. And office occupancy rates are still relatively low. We've gotten to know this group in the Netherlands called Nature Desks, and they organize this international outdoor office day every year. It's usually in June. The date changes, but I think for a lot of us, it's difficult to go back into that cubicled inside space, disconnected for nature. We're trying to find other places to work and other ways to work. So nature is something, again, not optional. It's absolutely essential to leading a happy, healthy, meaningful life. We are in our Biophilic Cities Network often talking about this idea of the nature pyramid, and we have a lot of material about it and writing about it a lot. And a lot of our cities here, you see a version for Singapore, based really on this idea of the food pyramid. The thing that the USDA used to like to use to help guide choices about what we eat. And the things at the top of that food pyramid were things that we wanted to discourage. Well, we wanted to suggest that those are things that you want to consume in small quantities, but the bulk of your diet should be, your healthy diet should be those things at the base of that pyramid, the fruits and vegetables and so on. And similarly, there's an analogous kind of pyramid for your healthy nature diet. And we've been thinking a lot about what it means to have a nature diet and what might be the components of that. And so again, it's got to be those things not things that you get on that maybe perhaps immersive trip to some faraway place. We can't afford the carbon footprint connected with those trips for you to build your nature diet around them. It has to be those things at the bottom, the birds, the nature around you, trees, things that you will see and hear and experience, if not hourly, daily, weekly, and so on. And our cities are actually using this pyramid as a kind of diagnostic tool to understand what kinds of nature experiences their citizens their residents are getting. And we've started to work with people around the world who are sort of applying this nature pyramid idea. This is an interesting example from Belgium. They reached out to us and actually were working on a national daily dose of nature campaign and wanted to use the nature pyramid. We said that that would be great. We will help you with that. And it turned out that in Belgium, they have the food pyramid as well. People are used to seeing it, though, turned upside down like this. So it's really more of a food triangle, they call it. So the nature pyramid became a nature triangle, but it still serves the same, still has the same structure. You see the day, week, month, and year on the right. This by the way is the Dutch version. If your Dutch may not be very strong, there's a French version as well. We help them attach specific targets to each level. So this really interesting idea of what is a daily dose of nature. We're not sure what it is. We know that the evidence says that even a 30-second glimpse of a tree from a window has a positive effect. But we of course would love folks to spend more time in nature, a larger part of their day and week out in the natural world. These are images from Rotterdam in the Netherlands. They're trying to manage water, and water, it's sea level rise, it's flood river water, it's rain, dealing with rain, and so on. And for them, investments in nature are a really important part of what they're trying to do. All to suggest with this slide that resilience is another really important frame for cities as we think about how all the challenges that cities are facing connected to climate change, growing urban heat problem, for example, and almost anything that you can do to make your city more natureful will also make it more resilient. So there are those reasons to think about nature also. So there's a longer story about the Biophilic Cities Network, but I should say that I'd love to encourage everybody to go and look at the webpage. It's biophilic.cities.org. There are 35 cities now officially in our network as partner cities. And when you join as a partner city, there is a curated page for your city. Each city has their own page, so you can find a lot more information about many of the cities I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm happy to talk about the joining requirements, the application requirements. Here's an image of me. I often show up. There's usually a celebratory event, and the one on the upper right, that photograph is from an big Earth Day event in Raleigh, North Carolina at the Dorothea Dix Park, and that's a city council member receiving the certificate. But we do a lot of things in the network. A lot of it has to do with cities sharing insights and information and experience and helping each other imagine more nature and grow more nature in their cities. We make short films. I'm going to tell you along the way in a number of places where we've made films, and I'd love for you to go and watch them. There is a bit of a sweet spot we've discovered. 5 to 10 minute short films seem to be really effective at conveying stories. And so I think we have about 50 of those short films now on our film page. There's an online journal called the Biophilic Cities Journal. It's all available there to read, lots of articles about cities and profiles of projects and nature-centered development, so on. So a lot on the webpage. So just to talk a minute about what's happening in the world, there certainly is a big and growing awareness of the importance of incorporating nature into the design of everything. But I teach in a school of architecture, and it has become ever more important to architects. So you'll often hear the language of biophilic design, and that can incorporate urban planning or the city scale, which is my focus, but it's often mostly meant to talk about the ways we bring nature inside, or we incorporate it into the design of buildings. Wonderful examples that we've profiled and have made films about. This is a Ty Farrow designed cancer center in Toronto. you walk into this building and you see the living trees, the living nature, but also the shapes and forms of these beams. This is a early example of a mass timber structure, but it's meant to feel like you're walking into a forest and you're in the canopy of a forest. So a lot of interest, especially in hospitals and healthcare buildings and facilities, the idea of enlisting nature in the healing process is a really important one. So actually, here's my first example of a short film that I'd love for you to watch. It's a really a new one about this wonderful building called project called Kampong Admiralty in Singapore. I'm kidding with Leslie that I have a number of Singapore slides. Singapore and Evanston may seem like quite different places, but Singapore is one of those places that is inspiring a lot of cities to invest in nature or prioritize nature. So this is the on the left, co-founder of a wonderful design firm called Woha, and he's talking to me on the seventh floor roof. You see it a little bit on the right, and this building has a multi-tiered rooftop, 600 trees on the top on the roof. If you were a bird flying over it looking down, you would think it was a tropical rainforest. And it's a wonderful story. And we like to say that a biophilic city is certainly a city with lots of biophilic buildings, and every building in every city needs to be incorporating nature. But a biophilic city is more than just a city full of biophilic buildings. There are so many other ways and places where nature can be incorporated, and I'll show you some examples of that. So we think a biophilic city is a city that emphasizes connections, connecting people to nature around them. It's about nature conservation. We know we're in the middle of a huge biodiversity crisis globally. Cities can't be the only answer to that, but they can play a significant role. And we're frequently talking about this in terms of coexistence and care, and that there's an ethical duty to make room for non-human life in the places where we live, and that our lives are better when we're able to do that. So I'm going to use the word coexistence a few more times tonight. We think that a biophilic city is one that thinks in terms of nature at different scales, and nature that is continuous and interconnected. This is an image of the map from Helsinki, Finland. So there you can move from a very dense urban center all the way out to old growth forest, and there's a continuous connection to that nature. We're often talking about this as a whole of city approach. So it's room or rooftop to region or bioregion, and all the scales in between. And really at the heart of this vision is the idea that we want to live in a city that where we're not disconnected from nature, where we don't see nature as something separate, and we are in fact part of nature. We're immersed in nature, and so Singapore is often our best expression of this vision and demonstration of this vision. So some of you know the story about Singapore. Is for many years they called themselves a garden city. More recently, they changed their motto to City in a Garden, which seems like a small change, but really quite profound. We want to see ourselves living in that garden or that forest or that ecosystem, which of course a city is. More recently, they've changed their motto to a city in nature, kind of questioning whether maybe a garden is a little too human tended and a little bit, but wanting a little bit more focus on the wildness of nature. So doing lots of things in Singapore and other cities in our network to advance that vision. In Singapore, there's something called the landscape replacement policy that requires that when you build a building, you have to at least replace the nature lost at ground level with nature in the vertical spaces of that building. So in this case, you see a hotel behind the words here. Another WOHA design structure that replaces nature about 2-to-1 in vertical nature, and that's sky parks and green rooftops and vertical gardens and things like that. So if I had to summarize the kind of key attributes of a biophilic city, of this vision, it's immersive nature, integrated, continuous, and seamless. It's integration of built and natural environments. It's whole of city. I just kind of defined what that means. Whole of life. So children, kids growing up need to have contact with nature. And so you ought to have that exposure to nature early on and have it throughout your life, through adulthood and into elderhood even. It's about parks, but it's really about thinking beyond parks. So our vision is that we're moving from a idea of a city where you need to walk to that nature or find that nature, again, to a vision of cities that are nature. It's biodiversity and it's wildness. We'll maybe talk a little bit more about wildness. It's a culture of biophilia. So not just the presence or absence of nature, but how much do we care about that nature? How much do we know about it? Are we able to recognize common species of flora and fauna? How are we investing our time in helping to restore that nature? How committed are we to the nature in our city? And then last but very important, just and inclusive. So we know that, especially in American cities, nature is not fairly or evenly distributed. This is a result of redlining and long-standing practices of spatial segregation. We know neighborhoods of color have fewer parks and smaller parks and lower levels of tree canopy. So we frequently talk about a just biophilia, and that's a big part of the vision as well. So here's just a sampling of many of the cities, a few of the cities in our network. I meant to say, by the way, also that with 35 partner cities that have gone through an application process are joining as cities, but then we have thousands of individual members, and you all can become individual members just by going online and signing a pledge. And then we have hundreds of organizations that are also members. I've mentioned the films, just to point out, there are some new ones. Love for you to take a look at some of these films. It's a low commitment of time. As I say, most of them are 10 minutes or less. This is an example of a new one, profile of the Atlanta Coyote Project. Chris Mowry. These are really relatively low budget films. Usually there's a cameraman and me asking questions or talking to somebody as we walk along, and the folks you see on the right were folks walking their dogs who just happened by, and it led to a really wonderful conversation with Chris about coyotes and misunderstandings of coyotes, the biology of coyotes, and so on. So a lot of really interesting films. Just to say a little bit more about some of the other key attributes of a biophilic city, or key kind of elements of the philosophy of biophilic urbanism. Wildness, we want wild nature. Again, it needs to be all around us. A lot of this in cities, and the cities in our network, is about restoring or regenerating that nature. This is an example of a stream, a small river actually, that was underground in a pipe in the city of Vitoria-Gasteiz, the capital of the Basque Country in Spain, one of our original 10 partner cities. They brought it back to the surface, brought that nature back into the very interior of the city, and created wonderful spaces that people want to spend time. Another example of this is the Chongqing River. We have an article coming out next week, I think, or very shortly, about the Chongqing and about it. It's the wonderful story, actually, of taking down an elevated highway in that city, and actually another daylighting example, bringing this river back to the surface where it originally existed, and in the process creating this amazing beautiful green tentacle that sort of passes through the center of Seoul. A really wonderful story. A lot of what we're seeing in our cities, again, is bringing wildness back, or sometimes we're talking about rewilding or wilding, making room for non-human life. We have a short film actually about these smooth-coated otters that you see on the right. They've become sort of global celebrities. A lot of folks know the story. There are now more than 80 of them that have returned to this dense city-state, largely because of the restoration of habitat. this river that you see on the left used to be just a hard surface engineered flood channel. But that the Kalang River now has been restored. It is a meandering natural river, a lot of habitat, and that's one of the key reasons the otters have returned. And you see the image on the left after some big rains in Singapore. This other thing that it does is collect and retain floodwater much more effectively, and it's doing in this picture what it was meant to do. So Austin, Texas is in our network. We have, this is an example a lot of you may already know about, 1.5 million Mexican free-tailed bats that took up residence under the Congress Avenue Bridge in downtown Austin. The first impulse of the city was to see them as a health risk and to eradicate them. Merlin Tuttle, founder of Bat Conservation International, had a big role in changing their perception, and today hundreds of people line up as the sun goes down during the summer months and to see the emergence of the bats, and they've become in a way celebrities like the smooth-coated otters in Singapore. But designing bridges now that can be habitat for bats is really some important ideas about how what a city should be like and make room for. So another example, Edmonton, Canada, a place that has done a lot of its planning around ecological connectivity. Really interesting way in which they have used tools like circuit theory, this idea of looking at your city in terms of like an electrical circuit system, looking for places where there might be a disconnect, a disconnect, for example, in the tree canopy that might make it difficult for some birds to move through the city. So actually looking at the city through the perspective of a chickadee is a really wonderful sort of idea. I'm going to get to birds in just a minute. Edmonton is a little unique in that it is it has mandated actually that for any new road or development project, there have to be wildlife passages that allow animals to move through and around the city. And you see actually one of the newer ones in the photographs on the left, and so they're now 35, probably more than 35 now. But one thing they've discovered is that this leads to a reduction in car wildlife crashes or collisions, and pretty significant reduction in that city. So St. Louis is another one of our partner cities, and we've just in September had the second iteration of a symposium focused around the city of St. Louis, aspiring to be the nature city for the 21st century. It's quite an interesting aspiration, and we've been helping with it. There's a group at Washington University and also the Missouri Botanical Garden and the city that are all collaborating around this agenda. And these are images actually from a movie that we're making now. We've filmed. Steve Blake is a biology professor at St. Louis University. He has radio tagged a number of critters in this biggest park in St. Louis, Forest Park. So this film, we actually followed Steve around as he tracked one of the male three-toed box turtles, and we ended up finding it on camera. But really wonderful kind of insights and evidence from research about the challenges turtles are facing in an urban environment. Los Angeles is in our network as well. Many of you know about P22. Mountain lion had to be euthanized, unfortunately, but became another celebrity. And the idea that you need to be thinking about in a big city like Los Angeles, making room for mountain lions. Really exciting to live in a city where you might catch a glimpse of a mountain lion. And so one of the things they're building right now is this massive land bridge or eco bridge that's crossing the 101, this ability for different populations of mountain lions to exchange genetic material, to actually keep the maintain the possibility of viable mountain lion populations in Los Angeles. And the road systems, of course, like in Edmonton, are going to have to be a major focus. But they also have recently prepared a pretty impressive set of biodiversity guidelines. Here's a little bit of a sampling. There actually are some elements of it that talk about birds, and we've helped them with that a little bit. But these are guidelines that would be optional, but they are meant to help guide many of the decisions of the city and the different agencies in the operating in the city. So an emphasis on biodiversity in the broadest possible sense. So we've just done a little film about beavers, and you know, the story and some articles in our journal as well about this and the ways that some cities are making room for beavers and recognizing that they are really important natural engineers, right? They're able to create these amazing wetland environments that end up being so biodiverse, and they capture pollutants and stormwater. They do so many things for us. And so I'd love for you to watch this little film about beavers. These images, by the way, are in the center of a public golf course in Atlanta that birders in Atlanta actually know as a really important birding spot. So it's really interesting. The birds know where to be, and we know where to find the birds. And it's an indicator of just how of the quality of this habitat. These are images actually that a story we filmed in Seattle about a small park. There should be a little video that plays here in just a second, but we discovered that these beavers had become kind of beloved by the surrounding neighborhood, and that people were actually timing the walking of their dogs so that they could see the beavers. So we have, of course, lots of tried and tested techniques for coexistence, and I can talk about some of those water so-called beaver deceivers that actually can prevent roads and spaces from being flooded when the water gets too high. We want beavers, and in the West, actually, this person in particular, Emily Fairfax, we have done some writing about her work, discovering that we want beavers in part because they create these incredible watery environments, wetlands and water channels that actually end up being really important fire breaks. And it's one response to wildfires, which we think of as a Western problem in particular, but of course we have lots of recent wildfire in eastern and northeastern cities. So here are some of those things: pond levelers, flow devices, this idea of a beaver deceiver, diversionary feeding, ways that we can actually techniques for protecting the trees we don't want them to damage or cut down, including special paint that beavers don't like. So to birds, this has been a real interest of mine for a long time, and have been writing a lot about the idea of a bird-friendly city, and we've gotten some good attention, good press about this, including a story in Fast Company you see on the left, and this Island Press book on the right. I can't say that I can't claim to be an accomplished birder, but I am a lifelong bird lover, and I do think that that birds are a big part of what makes a city a good place to live. And I'm often arguing for the metric of birdsong as a metric, as an indicator of a good city. So if you are able to hear native birdsong, abundant native birdsong in every neighborhood of that city, that's a good city. That's a measure of a good city. Like biophilia more generally, this is something that's multisensory. Sound is a really important part of this. This is probably my favorite bird, eastern wood thrush. I hear that sound That magical sound in the spring. I've been kind of keeping track of when I see or hear the first wood thrush in my neighborhood. It takes me back immediately to my childhood. I think of my parents. So the sound of birds really important. We know that birds, of course, are not doing well. Half the bird species in the world are in decline. Most of you know, I think, of this 2019 study that found we'd lost, something like 3 billion birds just in North America alone. This is bird abundance, and just since 1970. So kind of a remarkable decline in a very rapid time frame. So what is a bird-friendly city? These are some of the things that are discussed in that book. And I don't have the time now to go through all those, but there are bird-friendly bird certification systems that I'm sure you know something about. I serve on the advisory board for bird-friendly for Birds Canada, and they have a bird-friendly certification system that's quite impressive, that has a set of mandatory standards and then variable standards that get different scores depending on how stringent they are, and you have to meet a certain score to be certified. And then now 30 cities in Canada that have gotten the bird-friendly certification award or designation. So I think you all know what the threats are. There are many different kinds of threats, and they're bigger threats, of course, like climate change and overuse of pesticides and loss of insect populations, all kinds of things, lighting. Some of those we have a hard time addressing at the local level, but I think what's important is that there are so many things that we can do. What do birds see when they look at buildings? Well, it is the reflection of a cloud or a tree or greenery of some kind. This is a building in New York, and that birds will not see that window as a barrier. I don't know how many birds I have discovered. This is my hand holding two birds that were killed by striking our own School of Architecture here. We've been trying to retrofit our building, but it's been slow. And I do think architects in particular have a moral duty to be designing buildings and specifying bird-safe glass and bird-safe building materials. And these are things that cities, in fact, can do. A lot of really impressive stories of volunteers who are engaged in collision monitoring during peak migration times. The early example of FLAP. Many of you know about FLAP in Toronto. There's a chapter in the book about FLAP. It's really an inspiring story, and just part of it is about demonstrating the magnitude of the problem, how many birds we're losing, birds of all different species, all different sizes. So in Toronto, they collect these birds over the year, and then they display them in a very dramatic fashion, and they get headline news in the local newspaper. And it has made a difference, and it has changed the narrative. So we know what we can do. We know what we need to do, and a lot of it has to do, again, with bird-friendly windows and glass, fritted glass, baked in ceramic pieces that birds will see. This is the Jacob Javits Center in New York that completely retrofitted their glass with fritted glass, and not more than a 90% reduction in bird mortality. But interestingly enough, it also led to lower energy consumption for the building and a lower carbon footprint. So the city of New York is aspiring to some pretty impressive carbon targets. And so making a building bird friendly does many different things for us. And there was a green roof installed at the same time, and a lot of nesting birds on that roof, another benefit. So we know what the density pattern is that is needed for birds to see that glass as a barrier. It's 2 inches by 2 inches or more dense, or 5 centimeters by 5 centimeters. And we have a lot of products and a lot of ways of retrofitting glass. This is a product called Feather Friendly, comes in strips, comes in rolls and it leaves, basically has little dots that adhere to the window, or paracord systems, right, that are very inexpensive. This is a little film actually we've made about the Frick Environmental Center in Pittsburgh, and here a high school kids actually helped design and install this paracord system that drapes. These paracords come, on the outside of the window. It's very effective and costs not very much at all. So we do have UV glass products. Leslie, we were talking about the American Bird Conservancy earlier. They of course have a flight factor, risk factor rating system based on tunnel tests, and UV glass is promising, although most bird advocates would say the fritted glass is much more effective. We're beginning to do this here on new buildings at our campus, and many other universities are now, or some, starting to mandate the use of bird safe glass. We're trying to retrofit our building a little bit at a time. Unfortunately, it's not fast enough, but you see installation of feather friendly on the left, and then a group of students actually that designed and painted a mural on some of the more dangerous windows on our building. So anyway, we have lots of examples, and I'll skip through this, and happy to circle back if there's anything that you would like to talk more about. National Conservation Training Center has been very helpful in testing, and not testing, but demonstrating and showing what some of these products are. Kaleidoscape is another one on the right. Or designing buildings with facades that make those buildings really interesting architecturally, and that birds can see. So Michael Mazur, who founded FLAP in Toronto, likes to say that making a building bird safe will also make it more architecturally interesting. The good news is the trend in the direction of cities mandating bird safe glass and bird safe building materials. The best recent example being the city of New York, under local law 15. Again, happy to tell you more about the details of that if you're interested. Light, of course, lighting is a huge problem. I know you're going to hear about the dark sky from dark sky folks. We're big fans of Dark Sky International. A lot of cities now have some form of lights out program, where usually voluntary programs where building owners turn off the lights at certain times of the night during peak migration. One of our partner cities, Raleigh, to its credit, actually has a municipal policy for turning off lights of municipal buildings and facilities during peak migration, and that's important as well. Okay, I'm not sure how I'm doing on time. Lots of ways to
We are in the last 15 minutes, just so you
Okay,
know.
last 15.
But we can
It's
go
been
over if we need to.
45 minutes already. Wow. This is the zone I can get into sometimes, but I'll just quickly go through a number of examples of buildings that incorporate habitat. So, it's one thing to think about making a city safer and making buildings safer, but to go even further, to see that building or that building project or that neighborhood design as an opportunity to increase habitat or enhance the habitat value of a place. And one dramatic recent example is the St. John's Terminal. This is the New York Google headquarters, or New York or Google office in New York. And it was co-designed with folks from what was before New York City Audubon, is now the New York City Bird Alliance. So I'll let you read this, and you see some of its native plantings and native trees and a green roof and other things that are helpful. But the really interesting precedent of having bird experts and bird advocates at the table when designing new buildings is, I think, really, really wonderful. In the book, quite a bit of discussion about things happening around the world. And this is an example from the UK of a wildlife friendly project. I mentioned or maybe I didn't, that the UK now has a biodiversity net gain, a standard for all approval of all new development projects. And so incorporating things like these Swift bricks into the facades of buildings is one part of that. I know that you've been spending a lot of time thinking about transforming yards. We need to, I agree wholeheartedly, we need to transition from that turf grass, biologically sterile, single species, not doing much for birds, to something else, to something pollinator gardens and native trees that provide the caterpillars, for example, that nesting birds require. And this is the story of the certified backyard habitat in a program in Portland, which is really in some ways the gold standard, I think. And happy to tell you more about that. We know that there's a lot of resistance around the country. This is actually a story from Toronto. Our friend Nina Marie Lister, you see her beautiful native garden here, the goldenrod and all the milkweed and all wonderful things that her yard is doing for the larger world. And yet she was approached by a city inspector who told her her yard violated the Toronto tall grass and weeds bylaw, and she was basically threatened with a fine. And anyway, it's a longer story. She resisted, started a Canada-wide discussion about yards and lawns, and was able to actually change the law in Toronto so that native gardens like hers are now something that homeowners can install by right, and they're not subject to this tall grass and weeds ordinance. So I wanted to say, I'm quickly out of time pretty much, but there are a lot of slides that have to do with trees and tree conservation, and I wanted to transition by telling you about a film that we're just making about chimney swifts and the famous Davy Poplar at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And it's like the Voxa swifts actually in Portland, where these swifts, as they're migrating, as the sun goes down, they have moved to chimneys, but this particular older poplar has a huge cavity, and there are thousands of chimney swifts that now descend and roost in this chimney as night falls. We need older trees, and that's a big part of the message. My message when I'm talking about trees and canopy and urban forest targets. I think most of you know Doug Tallamy's work. We can circle back to that. He's been such an important advocate for native trees like oaks, and I, like Doug, my favorite tree is a white oak. So we've been trying to figure out how we can protect those older existing trees, the mature trees. That a lot of focus in many cities is on planting young trees, and we need to be planting more trees. That's definitely true. But the first task is to protect the existing older trees, and there are many things that we can do, and I'll just quickly talk about some of them. I've been spending a lot of time thinking about how to change the psychology of homeowners and others who have some degree of decision-making power over trees. So this is an example from my neighborhood of 3 very beautiful large trees. The homeowner cut them down for no particular reason. My wife thought it might be interesting for me to paint the word Y, spray paint Y on the stumps. I don't think that would have been a very good idea. But a lot of what I'm thinking about now is that that we do need to change the psychology, the way we look at trees. And it's not simply cutting down that tree. Yes, it's private property, but I think we need to do what we can to shift our collective thinking that cutting down that tree is cutting down a part of the forest that we're all counting on and we're all affected by. And so there are a lot of pieces to this. Part of my campaign has to do with engaging get neighbors and in neighborhoods about the trees around them. So I'm now going out of my way to compliment my neighbors about their trees. Little things like that can actually change the psychology. You're not likely to cut down a tree if you think others around you enjoy that tree, think it's beautiful, are complimenting you on it. This is my neighbor across the street who doesn't need me to compliment the tree. She's committed to protecting it already, this spectacular willow oak. We've made a short film. We're trying to make films that tell the remarkable stories of people and organizations and cities that are doing wonderful work to protect the older trees around them. This is a retired high school teacher in Atlanta who's created this public forest in her backyard, and she's become an advocate for tree conservation in her neighborhood. A lot of the films, I'd love for you to watch some of these. This is from Seattle, a new development that started with protecting the trees. Mostly what happens is that developers come in and cut down everything and then start over. But in this case, they started with the existing trees and canopy and designed the buildings and the placement of the buildings and parking areas and so on in order to protect the trees. So we have a 8 or 10-minute film about Bryant Heights in Seattle. Watch the film. I mean, you're probably getting tired of me saying watch the film. So we do need stronger tree codes. We have lots of good examples or partial examples from our network. The Washington, D.C. Tree Canopy Protection Act is one of them. Atlanta has just adopted a new tree code that it's probably not as good as the code they had before, but they have a very interesting system for allowing residents to appeal the issuance of tree removal permits. And I'll tell you more about that. And that's had some great results. I'm part of changing the psychology is changing the incentive structure. So this is a bird example, but there are a lot of ways that we subsidize the shifting of the use of space around our homes. You all are thinking about this, I'm sure. Cash for grass or xeriscaping programs in a lot of cities like Los Angeles, subsidizing the conversion of a thirsty suburban yard to something else it's not uncommon. This may be the good place to stop, but we're looking for new examples and examples of ideas we've had for a long time. And this is one of them. We've often been arguing that if you are a homeowner and you have large older trees on your lot or around your house, and you want to protect them and save them and not cut them down and care for them, that we as a public, as a city, should actually help to underwrite that financially. And that might take the form of reducing your property taxes to reflect the value of the ecosystem services that your trees are providing for all of us and the bird habitat and so on. So we haven't discovered very many examples, but this is actually a one from Western Australia in the city of Canning, where they have now, just over the summer, adopted an ordinance or a code that will provide $200, $200 per year. This is Australian dollars, but it's pretty close to US. 200 per year per tree. So you could have 5 older significant trees and together be receiving $1,000. That may not seem like a lot, but I think there's less likelihood that you're going to be cutting down trees if you know that it will result in out of a clear financial a negative financial impact for you as a homeowner. So a lot of other cool things that we're doing with the Center for Forest Urbanism, and a lot of other cool ideas in our cities, urban wind path forests in South Korea, old growth forest network. We can talk about that as well. Cities like Arlington that have designated or certified old growth forests in their parks. We've been doing a lot of work around tiny forests, and there's a film about the 200 plus Miyawaki forests or tiny forests that have been planted in the Netherlands. If you're interested in that, here on the campus of my university, we've now planted our 6th tiny forest or Milwaukee forest. We're calling them forest patches. So a lot of really cool things around trees. And then if we had time, I was going to circle back to birds and talk a little bit about cats because they're a big threat to birds. We have a film about catios on the catio tour. Portland, Oregon is a partner city. Wonderful story there. And then other stories in the book. I mentioned Vox's swifts, and we have a little film about Vox's swifts in Portland as well. So that is actually it. And I will stop sharing. And I realize that there's a lot of things about birds there, but also trees and native gardens and so on.
Yeah, well, thank
So
you so much for doing this. I really, really, really appreciate your time and going through so many different topics at in a really tight presentation. Thank you so much. Yeah,
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 well, good.
great.
Thank you. What do we have time for
I
comments
think
or
we do.
questions
I
or
mean,
okay.
we can speak a little bit. We got a question about green roofs.
Oh,
She
okay.
from Go Green Wilmette. She hasn't heard as much about green roofs lately. I agree with that. I haven't heard as much lately either. It used to
Uh-huh.
be a very discussed all the time with developments around Chicago, and now not so much.
Yeah.
I wonder if you have suggestions about that or whether to promote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's still important. I think maybe some of it is that it's become a more mainstream building technique. I mean, they're still happening in lots of places and a lot of cities, like Washington, D.C., that continue to have monetary, incentives to install them, credits under stormwater, ordinances, things like that. So there are plenty of green roofs that are still being built. And here I'm in the School of Architecture. It used to be maybe that it was this new kind of idea. And when Mayor Daley first installed the part of City Hall or part of the city county, building with a green roof, that got a big splash, and it definitely set and helped to set in motion a certain interest in green roofs. Maybe not as flashy or as it's not the newest thing in town anymore,
Hmm.
but it has become a pretty standard building practice. And a lot of the early problems with green roofs, like membranes that leak and that sort of thing have pretty much gone away. And there now is so many companies and so many off the shelf systems. So just as an example, we have a new something called the Code Building here in Charlottesville that has a series of tiered rooftops and really a kind of spectacular green garden, green space. It's not just we're seeing not just extensive green roofs, but intensive green roofs where you have trees and that's a little
Right.
bit more what we're focusing on with our forest urbanism. So yeah, still a lot of green roofs out there. But I can't speak to what's happening in Chicago.
Right. Right. Right.
What's
Right.
I mean, maybe it's helpful to have a mayor
Yeah.
who thinks
Yeah.
those things are important. I don't
Right.
know how you feel about the current mayor, but
Well, it's fun. So we also have
that's
on
a
the
diplomatic answer. Very good.
it's fine. We also have on the listening in quite a few bird collision monitors.
Oh,
And
you do? Okay, great.
I'm not gonna call them out, but the
Yeah.
American Institute of Architects has a building in downtown Chicago that is not very bird friendly. In fact, they
Mm.
collect birds around it all the time. So what's up with AIA? What
What's with AIA?
are they not?
Well,
What are they
yeah,
thinking about this?
yeah. I don't know about AIA specifically, but it
Okay,
reflects the larger ambivalence, I would say, of the design
right.
world. And I mean, you've had the convention center right there has gotten such kind of global attention for
Yes,
the
absolutely.
one night of 1,000 birds, but yeah, a death trap. And it almost takes that kind of attention, right, to get folks concerned about stuff. It's too bad, but the design world is interesting because there are some big advocates. Jeannie Gang, is an architect based in Chicago, and you probably know her work and
Hmm.
And she's designed at the Aqua Tower, and there are some dramatic examples of bird safe, bird friendly design. But I can tell you that I've taught more than 30 years now here in a school of architecture, and the young architects, the architectural students, are not really getting anything about birds. They're getting it from classes they might take from me.
Hmm.
But these are urban planning classes, and so it's something. I don't know, but AIA has an environment committee that's really wonderful, and so it depends on what part of AIA we're talking
Right.
about. It's a big organization,
Right. It's too
but
bad
yeah,
it is
I,
more
I
mainstream.
agree. I don't
So
know
yeah,
about this
yeah.
building. What's the building, and is it their own building?
Yeah, it's their headquarters down in Chicago. Yeah.
Oh, it's their
I
headquarters
think
building.
it is their
Okay,
headquarter
so
building.
it's
Yeah.
got lots of glass on it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
yep.
Well,
See if I can send you a picture later on, but
yeah, two or three AIA presidents ago, there was a president who was made that a priority, something he talked about. But that's quite unusual.
well,
So
anyway, yeah,
yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
there's still a lot of love for glass,
Yeah.
and
Right.
I don't quite understand it, but
Yeah. Beth, were you trying to ask something? I know you popped on your camera. If you were, you're welcome to join. Just pop back in.
do we
Um,
have any architects in the group?
I don't think we do in
Yeah.
the on the call right here. We have people who are we have Holly Greenberg on here who is has started a project to amplify the damage that was done on in October 2023 to at the McCormick Center that you mentioned.
At
A
McCormick,
thousand,
yeah.
yeah, she's creating a basically like an AIDS quilt of 18
Oh,
10,800 birds, rep
wow.
each representing a bird replica of a bird that died
That
in
bird actually died.
2023 in Chicago. Yeah, so
Okay.
it's a huge project, basically a 5-year
Well,
project.
you all can tell me, but I'm here. I get all these glowing reports about how feather friendly in particular, I guess, has been installed on a number of buildings, and maybe they're turning lights off and doing other things now that they weren't before.
Well, they've
Is it a
automated their
positive story in that way?
yeah, yeah, right, right. Their curtains are so enormous in that building
Hmm.
that I think that the part of the problem was that they weren't opening or closing curtains. So the interior, so they were saying, our tenants have to turn off their lights, and we don't want to push this on our tenants, but the curtains
Yeah.
were not something they could pull. So they are automating that, I believe. I wanted to mention too that in terms of the cities that are on your list, are there some that really surprise you that those was one of the questions we got in chat. Are there certain ones where you're like, you didn't expect that community would be, so wildlife friendly?
Um,
Or
yeah, well, there is a certain element of self-selection in our network, obviously, right? That
right.
cities they have to actually, one of the things they have to do is adopt a formal resolution indicating, the intent to become a biophilic city and to join the network. They are generally cities like Wellington, New Zealand, Singapore, San Francisco, cities that are already kind of oriented towards this agenda. And then I'm not surprised often by some of the wonderful things happening. But there are cities, um, Pittsburgh, for example, or Phoenix, two examples of cities that have joined our network. And you wouldn't necessarily think of Phoenix. Phoenix has gotten somewhat of a bad rap, I think, for being, as one popular book said, the least sustainable city in the world, or something like that. Right?
Right.
But yet Phoenix has done some remarkable things, and in your particular your interest in conversion of yards and lawns, I mean, it's actually remarkable how just in, I don't know, 10 years, how much xeriscaping and how much sort of native landscaping, how much of a shift they've made in that direction, totally replanting the airport, for example. And they're doing it for a lot of different reasons, water conservation and energy conservation and so on. But those things are remarkable. Still a lot of issues in a city like Phoenix, a lot of neighborhoods that don't have much connection to nature, but they have some really spectacular larger desert parks that are really wonderful. So even those cities that may not be on the usual list of suspects, they're not San Francisco or Portland or Singapore, but I'm often pleasantly surprised at the things that are happening in those cities. And there's something going on everywhere, right? I mean, it's just and that gives me some hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Are there particular cities that you all know about or have followed, and what about Chicago generally, aside from the bird problem,
Well,
right? I mean, we
it's
got
had
the
an
Chicago
ordinance.
River, and
Yeah.
you've got lots of good things happening.
Well, that's true. On the Chicago River for sure. That is for sure true. The
Yeah.
there is a bird-friendly ordinance that is stalled and
Yeah,
in Chicago.
that
And
was something I wrote about in the book. That was like 4 years ago. So
I know
it never happened.
it hasn't happened so far. No, no.
Oh, that's too bad.
And in New York, I've talked to architects in New York who don't seem to be very much aware of the New York
Mm,
ordinance. So I
oh,
wonder if
really?
that's really happening, because I wonder if that is happening.
Yeah, well, the ordinance was adopted in 2020, but it didn't go into effect until 23, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
It is the law.
Okay.
And I mean, part of it is that they're using the ABC rating system. So they're you have a lot of flexibility about how to satisfy the law. You
Right.
have to, the ordinance says you have to specify materials that have a certain, threat factor, reach a certain, it's a minimum.
Right.
So you have a lot of ability to, I don't think it's something that's seen to be a big imposition, frankly, which is good. I think, it's a
Yeah.
relatively modest thing to require of building. We have building codes and lots of requirements that are much more onerous than that.
Yeah.
Would Evanston be interested in joining? We don't have very many smaller cities, but we have
Right.
a few in the sort of 30 to
I don't
100.
I don't know. We could look at that. I don't know.
Well,
I
it's
don't
one
I
more
don't know.
point of leverage. One of the
I
things that
would be interested in Evanston joining. I don't know if
yeah,
Evanston would be interested in
no,
Evanston
I know.
joining.
And once you as a city go on record, that you are aspiring to be a biophilic city and you've joined the network, it becomes an opportunity for you as a citizen to sort of, hold their feet to the fire
Absolutely.
in a way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we've discovered, I mean, you really need the city. There have to be city staff. There have to be mayor's office people,
Yeah.
sustainable direct, whatever. There has to be an interest in joining, and they have to see some value, some, benefit to being
Yeah.
in there. We think there are lots of benefits, but yeah.
Well,
Anyway,
we really
something to think about. And if it comes up, we'd be happy to
Yeah, well, thank
chat
you.
with anybody in the city about it.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time and for
Sure.
presenting
Happy
to
to do it,
our
and
little
good
group
luck to you.
here.
And thank you for
Yeah,
all you're doing.
and we'll share
It
the
sounds like you're
recording and yeah, get the
okay.
word out.
Sounds
Yeah.
good. All
Yeah,
right.
great.
Nice to see you all. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you
care.
so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.